Hello, everyone. This is Jerome Page. Thank you for joining us today. This is our third week of the What's On of the 1960s project. We're glad that everybody could join us. We'll give a few minutes for people to gather. And while they're gathering, I can share my screen here a minute and do this. So what we have today is that we are in the 1960s project. We are inviting folks to join us to share their reflections. We'll be sharing what's on the minds of those who were in high school during the years 1960 to 69. We'll be recalling, we'll be remembering, we'll be reflecting. We'll be sharing our tiny thoughts and our large memories. I want to welcome you and thank you for watching. And also, in addition to our Facebook Lives, our guests will have posted their submissions or essays, and we look forward to you reading those and getting your comments. So just while we're waiting, let me just take a minute and mention a couple historical facts. In 1967, and that's the year that we're going to be focusing on now because that's the year our guests completed high school, there was a Supreme Court decision called Loving versus Virginia, which struck down laws in 16 other states that prohibited the marriage of interracial marriages. And a few years ago, there was a movie that focused on that period in time in 1967, when, in essence, interracial marriages became legal across the United States. Also in 1967, there was an update of a executive order that was issued, a federal executive order, which banned discrimination based on race in federal hiring and federally funded projects. In 1967, that order was updated to include avoiding discrimination based on gender as well. Also in 67, and this has a particularly important ring today, is that Thurgood Marshall was appointed to the Supreme Court, and he became the first African American to serve on the Supreme Court. And with the recent passing of the Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we know the significance of having the right kind of people on the Supreme Court. So for today's Facebook Live, I want to welcome Linda Williams. And Linda was in high school during the 1964, 1965, and 1967. She graduated from Western High School in Washington, D.C. in 1967. I graduated in 1965 from Germantown High School in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. One of the other things that was popular in 1967 was that Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, recorded her signature song called Respect. So welcome, Linda. Are you with us there?
Yes, good afternoon.
Hi, Linda. Well,
Hi.
good. I'm glad you can join us. So,
glad to be here.
Yeah, good to see you. Aretha Franklin, Respect. Do you remember that tune?
I think we all remember Aretha Franklin and Respect, particularly, her message during that time. Yes.
Do you have any other popular songs that you remember from the 1966?
Well, you had a number of groups that were popular. I mean, you had the Temptations all during that time. Marvin Gaye was popular. I mean, Teddy Pendergrass was popular. So you had a number of groups with lots of messages, you know, that were popular during that time. Jazz was also, you know, you had music by, for example, I mean, Sun Ra, for example. You had a lot of activity with music going on at that time, as well
Yeah.
as dance. So,
Yes, a
I
lot
mean,
going
so there
on.
was a lot going on, which reflected the political situation all
It-
at that time.
yeah, in your essay, you call it snapshots, and I'm going to
Yes.
steal your title because that's the way my mind works too, as snapshots as we talk and remember things. As I was thinking about the Aretha tune, one of the things that popped to my mind was again, I'm from Germantown High School in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We had a senior trip to Washington, D.C.,
Mm.
and all on the train down and all on the train back was the
Everybody was.
constant playing of Baby Love by Ooh, Baby Love, my
Oh,
baby
baby
love.
love, my baby love. I need you
Yes,
more. I need your love.
they played
And
that all the way down to
yes,
Washington,
oh,
D.C., and all the way back
boy.
to Philadelphia.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
um,
Yeah, they were singing then.
so
You were,
Linda,
I mean, the group was really singing. You know, you had
yes.
melodies. You remember them. They weren't rapping then. They were singing.
So Linda,
Still a
how did you end
message.
up at
Still.
yeah? How did you end up
Uh,
at Western High School in
oh, in
Washington,
Northwest.
D.C.? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess when you talk about high school, I have to talk about what happened before high school, and
Okay.
I, I I grew up in Northeast Washington at the time, and I went to school when they desegregated schools. I was in kindergarten, and so my school at the time, when I started out, it was well integrated, mostly white at the lower grades, and as I moved to fifth and sixth grade, our school was predominantly black. From elementary, I went to junior high school, which was, now all this is as I remember, predominantly black. Um, the students were from the neighborhood. You had professionals, working class black families. They owned their houses. And so we had our teachers. Our teachers were predominantly black, predominantly black. And the teachers at that time the women wore heels, suits, dresses. The men wore ties, jackets. And so my junior high school, I think in order to talk about my high school, I got to talk about my junior high school. But at junior high school, I was successful. I felt included in my junior high school. Um, and so I did well in junior high school. Um, it was also the same time that John F. Kennedy was shot. And so I remember that. But none of the events outside of our school were ever discussed in our school. And maybe because we were in junior high. But when I went to high school, it was a little different. My father wanted me to go to a different high school because at the time, our community was changing. When I grew up in my community, we had what was called the Brentwood Village. And in the village, we had stores. We had, we, Jerome, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm
It's,
still here. Yeah,
okay.
you were telling your story. Yes, you were at
I
Brentwood
know.
Village, which is in northwest. I mean northeast
Yeah.
DC.
So anyway, we had the Brentwood Village. In the village, you had bakery, you had the movie theater, you had bowling alleys, you had Kresge's that had the counter, and so you had the uh, women's store, men's store, and so you had all of these things in the village at that time. And so this is when I was in elementary and junior high school, and towards the end, as I was approaching high school, our neighborhood started to change. Now my time frame is maybe a little off, but our neighborhood started to change. And when I talk about change, I'm talking about the fact that drugs entered our neighborhood, as well as they put projects in our neighborhood. Nothing wrong with projects in the neighborhood, but you have more people in a neighborhood, and the services were not expanded to accommodate the people. For example, I noticed that trash wasn't picked up as regular as it was before.
Mhm.
So our neighborhood was changing. And so my father felt that I should go to a different high school than what was in my neighborhood. And so he suggested that I go to Western High School. And so I traveled to Western High School.
How far, when you say traveled, how far was what did it take for you to get from Northeast over to another part of the city?
Well, I'm taking the crosstown bus. All right, so you're in Northeast and you're going all the way to the other part of the city, which is in Georgetown. Okay. And so, if going to school, you have to allow yourself time to get across town. So we're going to Western High School, which was different from my junior high school. In my junior high school, I felt, felt nurtured, felt supported. But my high school, it was different. And I talk about that in my paper, in as much as I noticed that teachers had favorites in the classrooms. And those were students that they would call on a regular basis. I was not one of those favorites that was included in the classroom. So when I go to high school, it's different from my perception of my junior high school. And so how did I do at that point? You had a lot of things going on outside of the high school now. You had the Vietnam War going on at the same time. And so
yeah, you mentioned in your essay that the challenges you had in high school caused you to do two things. One was to go to work. Can you explain how that came about?
Well, when you don't feel included, you begin not to go to school. I think some of the other people had shared that too. You just don't go to school, or you leave school early. And so I would leave school early. And
when you say leave school early, you mean in the school day? You graduated. You through the school day.
You would leave school before the school day. You would. They didn't have technology, calling directly all the time or consistently. So you would come to school so that you were marked here, but you may leave school before the end of the day. And eventually the counselor got me a job at the CMP telephone company at that time, since I was leaving school early. And so I started working at the CMP telephone company, which was from school. I would go. The CMP telephone company was located in downtown Washington. So now I'm taking a bus to go to downtown Washington, which opened up a whole new world for me at the time.
Okay. So you also mentioned that another shift was that you started learning on your own. You couldn't learn in school, so you started learning on your own. How did you go about learning on your own?
Number one, I've always been a reader, and so I would leave school on the days that I didn't work, and I would go to the Library of Congress. At that time, you could go into the Library of Congress. You could just go all through go down in the tunnel of the Library of Congress. And so I would stay there and I would sit and read. If you've ever been to the Library of Congress, you have the tables, you have the lights. So you would order your books. You could go leave and come back. And then when you return, the books would be on the table or whatever you ordered. So I would spend my time there, also walking around the Library of Congress. I did that. I found that really stimulating at that time. That was also the same time that I was introduced to the New Yorker magazine. I saw somebody, I would always look on to see what people were reading, and I would look and see what they were reading, particularly if they left, and then I would, look at whatever they were reading. Okay.
So you started
So
working, you started working, you started learning on your own, and you also
I
talked
started,
about your political reading on your own. You
yeah.
also talked about an expanded political awareness. What you mentioned the war in Vietnam. Were there other
Yeah.
things that piqued your interest politically and socially?
Well, the war in Vietnam to me was really important because one of our, I'm still, I'm in high school, and one of the people that a friend of mine who I knew in elementary school, a guy named Eddie Downs, I think I mentioned him in the narrative, and he was one of the first, persons that I knew who was killed in the war. Okay, and so this in itself was painful because I mean he was, I guess, no more than 18, 19 at the time, and so those of us who knew him and those of us who this was the very first person, so you knew that this war was serious. Okay, you also had things that happened before that that set the stage for our awareness. When we were younger, you had this whole issue of our family would go to Glen Echo Park and picket. Okay, so at the same time you had students going south, right? And at the same time we went to Glen Echo Park to picket. Our father and mother wanted us to understand the struggle, and so we went there. And I think I mentioned that, or I
You
mentioned that in
do.
my paper. I
So
did.
tell me, yes, you do. So tell me this. So you're in high school, you're expanded awareness, you're getting political education, you're reading a lot, and you finished high school. So what prompted you to go to college?
Well, I knew I didn't want to. I knew I didn't want to work at the CMP telephone company for the rest of my life. I mean, I knew I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go to the post office. The post office was what many people, many blacks that I knew of, that was the route. And I knew that I didn't want to be a hairstylist. My mother said if I don't go to college, then I could do that. I knew I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something more. And within our family, you have to know my mother at the time as well as my father, they wanted us to reach for more. And so I applied to Howard University. And at the same time, now this is when I graduate, this is 68. And at that same time, you had the killing of Martin Luther King. You had also the killing of Robert F. Kennedy. And so you had a lot going on, as well as you had Howard University, the struggles of the students at that time. So there were a lot of events that were going on for a student who's coming out of high school. You're working to stay focused, but you have all of this around you, and you're beginning to understand it because it begins to impact you. The Black Power struggle began to impact also.
So did it cause you to stay in school or cause you to pursue other things?
Well, it caused me to, the registration at Howard, if anybody who has gone to Howard, the registration was arduous. And so
Well, I read that in your paper about the registration, but I can attest that it was bad at other schools as well. So
technology was not Howard's best suit in terms of getting us registered. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I remember those lines.
Yes, so I'm trying to register for school, and you have all these other things that are outside of you now. Okay, and you're hearing about it through the news, particularly students going south. Okay, and protesting, and the water hose you see on television, just that's being squirted on people. I mean, it was really, really, there was really a struggle going on. So here you are trying to go to school, and it's hard to register. And then I'm getting C's on top of that. I'm working hard and getting C's. And so I said, oh, this is too much. So I left Howard, moved to New York City, to dance.
All right. And so where did so do you dance? So how did you ever come back? Did you ever finish school? Did
Well,
you ever
I
finish
mean, so
Howard?
what happened at the same time, I must say, I changed my hair. My hair always reflected how I felt. But at that time, I cut my hair and got an afro. And so my whole sense of self was starting to change. Before that point, it's almost like, you don't know where you fit or who you are, but my sense of who I am began to change, particularly when I got the afro, and particularly when I moved to New York, and my mother died, and I had to get, as I said, a reality check and come back and finish school, because you have to finish school. At least I felt that in order to move forward. So I came back, persevered with Howard's registration, and finished.
Well,
Okay.
good. Congratulations. Well, we're glad you finished. So what did you end up, what was your degrees when you finished
Well, I'm
school?
finance as well as secondary certification. So finance and secondary certification. And I said, well,
Well,
what
when you
can I
say
do?
secondary certification, you mean being able to
That
teach at the secondary
at the
level?
secondary, and then with my master's, I could teach at any level, elementary all
Right.
the way through, secondary in mathematics. So that means I can teach high school mathematics. Okay. So um, I said, well,
You mentioned in your essay that was a first of two major shifts getting that teaching certification. Why was that a major
yeah,
issue? Why was that a
uh-huh.
major event in your life?
Teaching. You mean
Getting the
teaching?
certification, getting the
The
certification.
certification, because it allowed me, I realized that I could become a teacher, but there's more to that. When I was in high school, teachers had special students that they would call on. That followed me, Jerome. That followed me all through my life. The notion of a teacher having favorites or special students that he or she would call on. You also have to realize they didn't have professional standards at that time. So teachers, how a teacher taught is so different then than how a teacher teaches now. Yeah, I mean, for example, in a chemistry class, a teacher would put students in their seats based on their grades. So the A student would sit in front of the room, and the F student would sit in the back of the room, and they would place students in that order. That is unacceptable now. Okay, so you had, because you didn't have professional standards, you had this eclectic behavior of teachers, but you also had teachers who had special special students would call on certain students. That followed me. Okay,
Mhm.
that
And
followed me
so,
all through
so
my
what,
career.
so what did the certification do for that? It give you an
It,
opportunity
it,
to
it
change
allowed
that?
me it allowed me to, number one, teach. And the game changer for me was when I was teaching in a penal institution, teaching men who were in
Right.
the maximum facility. And
And
that's really
what was the name of that facility?
Lorton Reformatory. And
Okay.
you had we went through a training, and at the end of the training, myself, another, a white female and a black male, we were assigned to the maximum facility of that of during that time. I never knew to this day why they assigned me as well as, but so I went into the maximum facility. When I went in there, that was a that was a game changer and a mind awakening, because in this facility at that time, I mean, I saw all of these black men, different shades, different colors, and they're in this maximum facility. And I would think to myself, okay, I can go home, I can come back next year, and they're still going to be here. So I was teaching them under this Senator Specter program. I think you're familiar with that.
Hmm. Yes, I am. Yeah. Okay. And so here you are. You've got your teaching certificate. You, in addition to your bachelor's degree, you've got these experiences of teaching at a maximum security facility, a prison. And then what does that lead you to doing next?
It taught me two things. It taught me, okay, so you're in the room, you have rules, in terms of where you can stand. Number one, they tell you when you come to the facility, you de-emphasize how you look. So you wear big shirts, de-emphasize your hair, and you do not talk personal with the inmates. So I would stand in front of the room, the guard would be in my vision, and I would teach the students. The thing that it gave me was my sense of responsibility as an instructor to teach them as best I can. And I would look at some of the guys and I would say to myself, why are they in here? And the guard would always say, Linda, let's go and look at their records, let's go and look at their files. And so after class, the guard would take me and I would look in their files, and you would see thick descriptions of things that happened to them. But when you look at some of the files, you could see that earlier on they were cast off. Okay, and so you think about that. So they were not they were not even in the classroom. Probably they were discarded. So they were cast off. So it gave me a sense of responsibility again to make certain that they're included. Everybody's included in instruction.
And based on your essay, you talked about how that led you to getting graduate degrees, and
yes.
then basically coming up with a new way to teach. Well, to make sure that students were included.
You still didn't have standards. You still didn't have standards as you have now, okay, for teachers. And so I taught at a university. I think I mentioned that in my paper. But I was not in an environment that would serve children who are most needy. So I was assistant professor at the university. This is after I got my doctorate, and I would observe teachers, but it was in a different environment. And I said, our students need me more. I need to be in an environment. All students need you. I've been in different environments. All students need you, but I need to be in an environment where I can really make more of a difference. So I felt, okay. So, and then when I placed myself in that environment, whenever I would observe teachers, particularly if it's needed, I would draw the diagram of the classroom. And each time a teacher would talk to a student, I would put an X, okay? And if the teacher turned a certain way, I would have an arrow. And so at the end of the observation, I would share this with the teachers, and they would say, I would say, so here's who you're speaking with, and here's who you're not, and you're looking in this direction. And teachers would, they would say, oh my gosh, okay, I didn't know that. So if you think about that, and if you're doing that on a regular basis, all the time, most of the time, can you imagine how that affects students who are in the class? And then this
Linda,
is how
looking at your reading area essay, it sounded like that was a new invention on your part, an innovation on your part. I don't get a sense that anybody had experienced in junior high school, what you experienced in high school, what you experienced in college, and what you experienced in Lorton, teaching at Lorton, transformed how you approach teaching, and you then helped other teachers learn how to teach better. Is that a fair assessment?
It's not learn how to teach better, but to be aware of the dynamics of instruction. They can be excellent teachers, but you have to be aware of who's in your classroom. You have excellent teachers who are not necessarily aware of the notion of who's being included and who's being left out. With the standards now, teachers are aware, okay? With the professional standards for teachers, they are aware of who's included and who's left out. It's a whole different sensitivity now, particularly with technology, okay? So, but that's ongoing.
So Linda, I'm going to have to encourage people to go online and read your essay, because we're just running out of time right now. I told you we couldn't go fast, okay. And it did. So once these come, it goes really quickly. So
I see it did.
So where are you now? Tell us a little about where you are now. What stage of life are you in?
Well, I've retired.
Okay.
Oh, I'm at a, we all, you have studied, things have happened in your life. You work to be at peace with who you are. I've always said in the pond you're in, you want to make a ripple. I've made the ripple. I was volunteering with hospice. Okay. And that um, reminded me to grab life. And so you'll grab life while we're here. And I always say that to my children, to grab life. Whatever comes your way, it's what it is. And you make your world, which is very important. So I'm at peace now. I love living. I enjoy different people. And I'm pretty happy with myself at this point. And so that's how I look at life right now. I grab life. We do the best we can. Each of us has different paths that that he or she has to take, and each person has his or own reality, and I think that's important.
Well, thank you very much for joining me on our third Facebook Live. We appreciate it very much. Because when you look back, it's been what for you 53 years since you graduated from high school. So
I
that's
was
a long
only 16.
time.
I was only 16 when I graduated from high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Over
Okay, I believe you. I believe you. So let me say then, thank everybody for listening. Unfortunately, we don't have any time for comments here to review. But in looking at the comments that have come up, everybody found your stories to be extremely intriguing and captivating. So thank you very much. And I invite people to go online and to read Linda's essay in its entirety. And also to join us next week, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. for another Facebook Live, exploring what's on the minds of students or people who graduated who attended high school in the 1960s. Yeah. Thank you very much, and good night and goodbye to everyone.
Good night, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, do the best you can.